morning. I'm State Senator Mallory McMorrow and Representative Joe Bellino.
From Monroe.
From Monroe. Welcome to the 13th Senate District. Can we just go around? Would you gentlemen mind introducing yourselves and a little bit about what you do?
Sure. Jim Chen, Vice President of Public Policy for Rivian Automotive. Basically, while our salespeople sell the cars, I sell the company.
I'm Glenn Stevens. I'm Executive Director of MichAuto and also Vice President of Automotive and Mobility Initiatives for the Detroit Regional Chamber. So MichAuto wears two hats. We're the statewide Automotive and Mobility Association for the industry, and we're also a part of the Detroit Chamber's economic development portfolio. So we're working with OEMs, suppliers, universities, community colleges, you name it, across the state.
And Cory, Connolly, I'm Vice President of Policy with the Michigan Energy Innovation Business Council. So we represent about 120 companies in the advanced energy industry, wind, solar, et cetera, and electric vehicle charging. So we come in, we're at the intersection of charging infrastructure and the electric grid.
Joe Bellino, nice to meet you.
Perfect intro. So what we wanted to do, we introduced a bill package actually back in June of last year with the goal of helping expand Michigan's electric vehicle charging infrastructure. I serve as one of the co-chairs of the Legislative Automotive Caucus and come at the legislature having worked in the auto industry. I was a car designer, worked in media for a little while, and have always been kind of auto industry adjacent. So for me, this is a really crucial intersection of making sure we set up the auto industry to compete not only domestically but globally as companies continue to invest in EVs and expansion there, but also to position Michigan to attract talent, send the message to the rest of the country that this is a state that is going to be welcoming to people who do want to make the switch to EVs. It is no secret that this is an unbelievably beautiful state, and if you're going to pick up a Rivian and you want to go on an adventure, you want to know that you can actually get up north to do that. So I'm really excited. We worked for about 6 months crafting a package of 4 bills with stakeholders, including environmental groups, industry groups, utilities, to make sure that we had everybody at the table when we were coming at this solution. And I'm really proud that it's a bipartisan bill package, that we have 2 Republican and 2 Democratic senators and House reps on the package, because this is a really good marriage of talent attraction, industry expansion, conservation. It's one of those unique issues where we can kind of do everything all at once, and should be a huge win for Michigan. So now that we're in a new year, we wanted to put this event together to re-energize interest in the bill package, to make sure that we can get bill hearings and get them passed, and hear from some folks who are touching kind of all areas of this industry and this issue on why this matters to Michigan. Representative, do you want to speak on why you joined forces with me on this?
Well, as an 18-year-old going to college, I worked part-time at the local Ford plant, which was a cool job, throwing bumpers in the summer of 78, 79. I see that if we don't have the proper pathway, we're going to lose a lot of business in the future. And I'm so happy people like Rivian are here in Michigan, and what the big three are trying to do to create vehicles that appeal to us, that I don't want to lose all our business to Nevada and California. So we got to make it a nice pathway to get it done.
Absolutely, and we've seen, since we introduced the bill package, a lot of really exciting news in the industry, from the Ford Mach-E to Rivian's news to job expansion. I mean, all of the automakers are investing, and it's time that the state put the pieces in place as well to make sure that we're supporting it. So with that, wanted to kick off just a small panel discussion. So to anybody here, what role in economic development and the future of the auto industry do you see EVs playing in the space? Start with Rivian. This is the entire core of the company.
Sure, yeah, that's exactly right, Senator. Our entire mission is all about all electric vehicles and electric adventure. And a little bit of history about the company. It was originally started by R.J. Scringe, PhD mechanical engineer out of MIT. He's actually from Florida. In fact, that's where the name Rivian comes from. He grew up alongside the Indian River. So Rivian is a play on where he grew up. Interesting thing was, and it's a little bit, if I can indulge a little bit, he started out in Florida and tried to find a company that would build a prototype vehicle for him because he knew he was going all electric. He couldn't find anyone. He ended up finding a space capsule company that was willing to bend metal for him. And then he just happened to be visiting Michigan, realized that, well, wait a minute, he had like half a dozen companies willing to build him a prototype at 1/10 of the cost of what he paid in Florida. And he thought to himself, why aren't we here in Michigan? Why aren't we in the, frankly, the capital of the automotive market, the automotive industry in the United States? So moved the whole company up here. We are based here. It's where our vehicle engineering, design, HR, finance, all the support structures, we're here in Michigan, and we continue to expand. EVs are the future. This technology is coming. It is a shift, a fundamental shift in the transportation sector that represents a revolution. And I use the word revolution deliberately because over the past 100 years, vehicles have basically evolved. I mean, the internal combustion engine has not really changed from its basic design since the 1900s. But now we're switching, we're completely flipping the paradigm to a new energy source, a new method that frankly capitalizes on sustainable energy, capitalizes on existing infrastructure, and is really shifting. And the great thing is, this technology in many ways is not only as good as, and in more ways, it's superior to the incumbent technology of internal combustion engine vehicles. So EVs are playing a huge role in Michigan's economy. Senator, I just shared with you the headline earlier this morning that Paslin, a supplier to Rivian, is investing $45 million into a plant expansion solely to supply robots to our manufacturing plant. So, I mean, EVs are the future. They are the shift in the automotive industry, and they're having huge economic impacts.
Well, that's a great segue into Glenn from MichAuto's perspective, because you represent not only the automakers, but a lot of the suppliers and the ancillary companies. What do you see from your perspective in the future of the auto industry and EVs?
Well, I think a perfect case study is what you just heard. I mean, the here and now is a company like Rivian moving here because of the density of the industry and what exists here. And so that's a perfect example. And then what we see, the multiplier effect with the suppliers and the other companies around it, they will grow too if the OEM grows. That's been proven throughout time. I guess what I do is kind of frame it in a bigger picture. The global auto industry is about a $3.5 trillion industry today. If you look out into the future about what personal mobility in a shared use economy will be, which includes EV, that's about a $7 trillion industry projected, about 20 years. So Michigan's $225 billion economic contribution industry today, it either grows with that industry or it dies without participation in it. It's just a simple fact. So our investment in this industry and having companies here, having it attractive for companies here, it's absolutely essential.
And from EIBC's perspective, so I think that's a good segue as well to another question is, when we talk about mobility, I think it's sort of this nebulous idea that could go on for a while. We're not sure if it's going to be autonomous, if it's going to be shared use, if there are going to be different vehicles, but I think there is an importance in tackling EV because EV is right now, and we see companies investing very heavily in EV right now, and consumers want to be able to make the switch. So what are you seeing from EIBC in terms of the importance of taking action now on something like EV infrastructure?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so for us, one of our policy platforms, we set them every legislative session. One of them is electrify everything, which obviously benefits our companies. And we're seeing that as something that's, and that's kind of how we get into the electric vehicle landscape and looking at how do you drive adoption now, but also how do you drive charging infrastructure across the state. And then when we have an increasing number of our member companies who do rooftop solar, battery storage, those types of things, they're combining those products and those service offerings with vehicle electrification, charging infrastructure at homes, at businesses, et cetera. So they're expanding out into that realm. So I think we're seeing that in terms of, there are two parts of the economic development to me, or one, at least at the moment as I think about it. And one is certainly the supply chain, the historical automotive industry that we have, and then there's actually the getting the infrastructure out there into communities and actually deploying those things. And we could do the first one I mentioned, the supply chain, provide this technology to the world without doing the latter, but I think puts us at a disadvantage not implementing the stuff that we're trying to get out to everyone. I guess the only thing I'd add just to what everybody said, I think I'd drive this point home, which is the inevitability of the transition that's happening to electric vehicles. You said autonomous, shared, connected vehicles are the future. They're all going to happen on an electrified platform for a variety of reasons. Namely, there are fewer moving parts. It's much easier to adjust, and it's much easier to control for that through updated software and analytics, et cetera. And so, like was said previously, it's more of a, are we going to have those jobs here? Are we going to take advantage of the opportunity that this presents? Or are we going to have this transition point be an opportunity for companies to move elsewhere, for automotive industry to take hold in other parts of the country, other parts of the world?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm a little selfish on this. I live in Monroe, so my county, my district is predicated on farming, manufacturing, and 2 big power plants. Well, the power plants, the coal burn won't be here 20 years. So my people, they work in Toledo at a GM plant, or Dearborn at a Ford plant, or at a Chrysler plant in Trenton. Automobile drives my county. So I'm selfish because I want these companies around here, even if they're made in Indiana, my suppliers are going to be supplying that. It's a few hours semi-drive away. It's all about economics.
Just to really kind of put in an extreme example, so if you look at an internal combustion engine, it roughly has 2,000 components in it. An EV, a lot less. Some would say as few as 20. So our supply chain, our economy today, has to evolve with it. So if EVs continue to take parts of the market, which they will, and they continue to have demand, and companies like Rivian grow at the expense of other companies or in conjunction, we have to have our supply chain move it with it, and those companies have to evolve too.
And I think it's one of the really important points is, you know, there's always a little bit of fear on the horizon whenever there's any change, but one of the reasons this was important for me as an issue was we either have the option to get ahead of it and plan for it to make sure that our supply chain is prepared, that residents are prepared, that our auto workers are prepared, or we fall behind and we lose our signature industry, not only to San Francisco, but to China and to other places that are investing very, very heavily. And you know, I want to shift to the infrastructure and why it's important. So before I helped work on these bills, I'm an industrial designer. I like to test things. So 2 years ago, actually, I got a Chevy Bolt EV, fully electric vehicle, and I wanted to test out what using the infrastructure was like. So for the first 1.5 years, we didn't have a charger at home, and I relied exclusively on public chargers. So I was testing, you know, how far I could get and what the range would be and what the experience would be like for the average person. And I will tell you, it was an adventure and a misadventure. A lot of times chargers were broken. A lot of times there was a vehicle that wasn't an EV parked in a charging spot. I drove around Royal Oak, which is where I live, for 4 hours one day trying to find a charger that was marked appropriately, was where it said it was, and wasn't broken. I'm somebody who likes that spirit of testing and adventure, and I know that's not how most people function. Don't have the time for that and don't have the willingness. So from anybody in the panel, I mean, what do you see? Do you see EV charging infrastructure as a major hurdle to adoption?
Can I say something real quick? I just got back from California. We had our November break. I went to see my daughter. I drove out there, visited people there, visited people back. I can't believe all the places I saw chargers.
Yeah.
You name it, I saw it. Malls, streets, parks, Walgreens. They were everywhere. And they were different brands, but they were charging GM cars. And there was Tesla spots too, but I was amazed. And the coolest spot was in Santa Barbara. Charging was free in the city park, but it was $4 an hour to park there. So they were getting their money somehow.
That's how they get you.
But I just couldn't believe it. I counted 72 chargers, and we have 4 in my county, Monroe.
Wow.
2 at the Fermi plant and 2 at the college. We have 4 chargers.
Yeah, we've got 2 fast chargers on my route to and from Lansing. So the range of a Chevy Bolt, it's rated for 239 miles. In the winter, I get around 170-mile range. it is 86 miles one way for me to get to Lansing. So there are many days where you will see me either in Novi or in Howell at one of the 2 fast chargers, and it's a fun way to meet people.
You don't have a charger in your building where you park?
We don't.
We have them in the house.
I know. This is one.
You went to the upper chamber.
One area where the House is superior to the Senate.
But go on.
And that's the only one. I like my chamber. A little competitiveness. But yeah, I mean, do you see this as a hurdle to adoption?
It's a hurdle and it's an opportunity. And Cory's organization works really heavily in this, but I'll set him up a little bit. So obviously the status of our infrastructure is critical, and we know that. Governor Whitmer and the team have made that a priority, and it has to be. I was down in Detroit this morning at a plant and driving on roads that I shouldn't have been driving on, and that has to be addressed. The second part of it is those roads have to be intelligent. So the vehicles are communicating to the infrastructure now, so that has to happen. And in conjunction with that, we have to have the EV infrastructure around it. I am from Marquette, and up until recently, there was not a charger in Marquette, which is absolutely amazing in 2020, but there is one now, and it gets, I mean, literally has a line of people in the summer, because there's a lot of tourism up there, waiting to charge their vehicle. So we're a state of tourism too, so if we're going to have people getting around and people traveling, we're going to need them. I particularly like the state parks aspect that you're focused on. I was standing in the Petoskey State Park this summer, and there were no chargers, not one, and it just seems like that's a place where they should be. But I know you guys are working real heavy on the infrastructure.
Well, and really quickly, I just want to clarify. So one bill in the package that Glenn mentioned would allow all of our state parks to lease out a space for charging and collect that revenue to go back into the state park system. So we figure great opportunity to promote green tourism as well, drive around all of our state parks, spend some time in nature, and charge your car while you're at it.
I think there's 104, something about, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, so I guess, Glenn teed me up here, so I'll go next. We actually host a series of convenings through the Energy Innovation Business Council that's on a lot of these topics around charging infrastructure. Is the problem adoption on the customer side? Is the problem the lack of infrastructure for folks to use? Is it both? I'm not smart enough to be able to tell you one way or the other, but what I can tell you is that generally folks don't want, one of the major reasons folks don't want to buy an electric vehicle is they're concerned about charging, they're concerned about range, particularly here in Michigan, with our desire to be able to go up north. I'm from Traverse City, so I want to be able to get up there on one charge someday. But a lot of the charging infrastructure, until you have high enough usage rates, you can't make an economic case for particularly DC fast charging, the fast charging model that you're talking about. They're too expensive at the moment without high enough usage to justify the return on the investment. And so that's where we really do need leadership from the legislature to help get charging infrastructure out there, whether that's level 2 or whether that's DC fast charging. So level 2 being a slightly slower charge, but much more cost effective. But we need those things, and that's why this is such a great first step, is we can get there, and that's where hopefully the state of Michigan can help kind of spur the market and allow people to have that comfort knowing that they can purchase a vehicle. And I'm a Volt with a V owner.
Not confusing at all.
Yeah, I know. And anyway, and so I got here on my one charge today, but then on the way back I'll be on gas, right? And that's because of my own personal anxieties of having that. So having the infrastructure out there is necessary, and I think there's a really important role for state government in the interim before the market can kind of help provide for that.
Yeah, from the OEM perspective, infrastructure is vitally important. There is very much range anxiety out there. A little bit of a personal story. I've been in the EV space for over a decade now, having started with a little company out of California called Tesla. And I had the benefit of driving some of the early vehicles that had the longest range available. And I turned to my wife the other day and I said, hey, look, your 12-year-old car is getting a little long in the tooth. How about, we switch to an EV? And my wife, who's driven the Teslas, loved electric vehicle technology, was like, well, I'm a little worried. Where am I going to charge? So range anxiety, even for folks that are in this industry, is a very real thing. Speaking as the OEM, we have looked at this solution in 2 ways. Number one, we absolutely have to have the infrastructure. And we are cooperating with folks like Electrify America, ChargePoint, some of the others out there to help do that. Our vehicles themselves have the SAE J1772 CCS combo charger. That is that universal, or soon becoming universal, charge port that all these different companies have clustered around. Between that and the fact that our trucks will get up to 400 miles of range, we think attacks the problem. And really it's, and people sometimes say, is this a chicken or an egg problem? And we have said it's both. And we do have to address both at the same time. And without that strong signal, without long-range vehicles, and without the infrastructure, the adoption of EVs will be considerably slower. It's not going to stop, but it's going to be a lot slower. So we have to work on these. So it's very encouraging to hear about the bill package like you have introduced that will help address this issue.
Yeah, I know that's been a conversation on, is it the vehicles, is it the purchase price of the vehicles, is it the infrastructure? And I wholly agree with you that I think it's the combination of everything. I would venture to guess that in Michigan we're going to see much wider adoption between Rivian trucks, Tesla's got a truck, Hummer is coming back, that there are going to be types of vehicles that people are really excited about, who don't want to downgrade. I love my Bolt. I know not everybody wants to drive a small, compact crossover. So that's really exciting. So when you look at something like EV infrastructure, and you look at other states, for those who are comparing kind of to other states, what are other states doing, and what is the risk if Michigan doesn't take the lead in this space? Looking at you, Glenn.
Well, I mean, it really does vary. We were actually looking at the map of how many chargers are in each state and we're doing some analysis right now. Actually, incidentally, or relevant to this, so EIBC, MichAuto, Clean Fuels Michigan, and Next Energy actually have banded together. So we meet quarterly and we share information, we make sure we're all on the right track, and it's really been beneficial. Yep. And we do this quarterly. So we're all together and not looking at different things. So that's been helpful. But if you look at, Michigan, we can't be an island or a peninsula. We are a peninsula, we have to have the infrastructure in place. And it's for the vehicles that are going to be on the road, and yes, adoption will be slow, but right now there's 101 different models of pure EVs in the world today. In 2026, there's going to be 411. Wow. So the OEMs are planning on this, and in other parts of the world it's growing quickly. It's going to happen here too. So if market demand is there and people want it to, and it is a live, work, and play thing too. So if we're going to have people that want to come here and people want to drive EVs, we have to have the infrastructure, whether it's city services or roads or EV infrastructure for the state to grow.
Yeah, I mean, one of the other things that's interesting, I see your numbers here, 101, 411. One of the challenges as we look at other states is seeing that vehicles aren't necessarily always available because there isn't local demand, there might not be charging infrastructure, et cetera. So your options might be, there might be 101, but when I go to my dealer, I've got one option. Or when I go look throughout the region, there's 4 options or something like that. And I think that's one of those chicken egg things, but without the infrastructure, we're not going to develop the supply chain pipeline to bring those vehicles to Michigan to be sold. It's going to slow uptake on the vehicles as well as on the infrastructure itself. So.
And there's a direct correlation to talent, whether it's the talent we need today to develop the vehicles or people just being attracted to the industry. I mean, younger people, when we've done work on this, they want to solve global issues, not have things contribute to them. And EVs help solve some global issues, particularly the emissions issue. So having that part of our culture and our lifestyle, that's a good thing for talent attraction to the industry itself too.
Yeah. Representative, do you have any other questions for the panel? Great. Yeah, I just piggybacking off of that note, I've spent some time since becoming a legislator traveling the country, and one of the things that has been, I think, disheartening for me, especially as somebody who chose Michigan by choice to call my home, coming from elsewhere, that I think there's still this perception that Michigan is not innovative enough. Many people still view Michigan as post-war industrial, Henry Ford revolutionized manufacturing. But we've moved so far since then. We have the most engineers, we have the most industrial designers, and how do we send that message to attract and retain talent when we're looking at declining birth rates, declining domestic migration? I think that's a crucially important part as well. So I'll open it up if anybody has any questions for the panel or about the bills. Yeah.
Jim mentioned big outside charging companies, ChargePoint, Electrify America, which are backed by big corporations. Is the state doing anything specifically working with those big charging companies to encourage more development of chargers across the state?
Yeah, well, and I want to say that that is specifically why we crafted this package the way that we did. So the first bill in the package, which is the one that Representative Bellino and I have in the House and the Senate, would create the EV Infrastructure Council that would be made up of people from the utilities, industry, environmental groups to collectively put together a plan on where chargers should be, how we might regulate chargers, how you might make up for, if we do see an uptick in adoption, which we hope there is, how do we make up for a shift in gas tax when people are buying EVs and registering EVs. So putting that in place, this group would exist for a year and be tasked with a very, very specific set of recommendations at the end so that we could help the private industries of the world who want to invest in Michigan make those investments in the right place and form a public-private partnership. The one bill in our package offers kind of what we're referring to as an incentive of last resort, where if you don't qualify for some of the incentive programs offered by consumers or DTE, or you're not working with Electrify America, that there is an incentive, particularly for small business owners. I think we know because fast charging, even the fastest technology right now, you're still going to be sitting for 30, 45 minutes to get a full charge on a vehicle. So helping some of our small business owners, whether it's restaurants, retail, hotels, places in all of our districts around the state where people are already spending a little bit of time to be able to invest and put a charger in, or multi-family dwelling owners. I think that's something that we've heard from NRDC as well, is that allowing for renters to participate when you might not have the ability to install a charger at home is really important. So that's why that was included in our package. But the package really is to help work with private industry as a state and say, we're here to help you and help implement this in a right way, and we are open for business.
At what point in the process are you now in terms of moving? Has that bill been introduced?
So the bills were all introduced last June. So in June 2019, the package, 4 bills was introduced in both the House and the Senate, and we can get you those bill numbers as well. Last year we were tied up with the budget largely, so it got sort of pushed through the end of the year, and we are trying to encourage that the bills be taken up in the Senate. They are in the Transportation Committee, and Senator Tom Barrett has told me he's interested in taking them up. We're just trying to light a fire that it's a priority, and we do it sooner than later.
We had some hearings last week. Representative Schroeder has a couple bills pertaining to charging, and we've got pretty good consensus, except for maybe ChargePoint doesn't like it yet. But I would like some rules out there that it's not Wild West when it comes to charging. So we've seen what they've done in other states and how sometimes they have great systems, sometimes they're bullying. Sometimes these companies just sue everybody in the House because they got the technology, they don't want anybody else to have it. So we got that through the House committee last week. We'll vote on it this week, I think. And we'll go from there. And Rep. Barrett will have hearings. I talked to him this weekend about it.
Great.
He was my seatmate last term, so it's good to know somebody that runs a committee. So
Yeah.
we're on our way. And the governor's all for it. And with the money that DTE and consumers are putting out this year, and I think the next 4 years, there's some money available to start building stuff out.
Can I ask you another question related but not about infrastructure? GM and LG, LG Chem, the Korean battery maker, are putting $2 billion plus into Ohio to build battery cells that are going to come back to Michigan and other places, but primarily coming back to Michigan to electric vehicle plants. What should the state be doing to attract that kind of investment rather than, I know it was a political decision likely on GM's part, I understand that, but okay, for the next investment that may be made, what can Michigan be doing at the state, at the government level to attract investment?
Well, you could talk on that. But
Yeah, I think you're right. There were probably some more reasons why that plant was located there. But as the industry grows, there's going to have to be more suppliers. In fact, some new suppliers are already locating here. I know the Detroit Regional Partnership actually helped a German battery technology company come here last year. But we're going to see more of that, and we'll have that if the right business climate, the right incentive climate's in place, if the talent is there to support these facilities, and we have a welcoming state and the infrastructure in place. I mean, that's the equation right there, is it's policy, talent, and infrastructure. And we have every chance of being able to do that. Rivian came here because of the climate and the environment that we have here. So we want more Rivians here, but we want the companies that supply, 75% of the vehicle comes from the suppliers, ultimately. So there's huge opportunity there.
And I would say, speaking with companies, particularly here in the Rochester Hills area, who might be smaller suppliers, but are still very much in the space, separate of this bill package, one of the biggest challenges that they've told me is we have openings right now and we can't fill them. So how are we encouraging job training programs to make sure that we have the talent pipeline that will allow the companies that are already here to grow and be a part of the EV industry.
Are those openings for skilled workers?
They're skilled workers and engineers. There's a group that has been suppliers that has recently formed the Aerospace Council as well, that came to Lansing for their first lobbying day, and it's a combination of skilled labor engineers to be able to expand their offerings to more people.
You've got a lot of job openings right now.
We do, and we're continuing to grow. I think the last time I looked, we were well over 1,800 employees, and the bulk of them are here in Michigan. You mentioned something earlier, what else can government do? I think in addition to looking at great packages like Senator and the Representative put together, is looking at existing laws to see where the impediments are to EV growth. There was news recently about an issue that exists in Michigan where manufacturers can't sell their vehicles directly. Tesla recently settled a lawsuit with the state of Michigan to be able to do everything short of title transfer. But I think we need to look at some of these older laws and why they were in existence, and maybe we don't need those anymore. So we certainly would love to be able to grow more in Michigan if we can remove some of these impediments.
That's a great point. I mean, EV and the technology, it's an inflection point for the industry. And when you have an inflection point, you either seize the opportunity and do things differently, change behaviors, change cultures, or you're a victim of the inflection point. And we've seen that in our history, where we've minimized new market forces. This is not one to be minimized. This is one to be seized. And there's a lot of things we can do to put in place to seize that.
Yeah, so one thing that's very specific to our organization, but I think is an interesting thing to highlight, is that in the electricity sector, maybe the biggest thing happening is the advancements in batteries. And so we are constantly at the Energy Innovation Business Council getting inquiries from big wind, solar, energy-related companies looking to develop a market for stationary applications of batteries, and trying to figure out how you have intersection there and diversification of revenue stream for the suppliers of batteries. They're very similar related technologies, particularly when you're looking at the lithium ion batteries that go into vehicles and then also that are going to be used in homes, paired with solar, et cetera. I think Michigan has a real opportunity to try and carve out a niche there around the battery supply chain, and it's one of those that could easily go somewhere else if we don't take a proactive approach to it.
Are your members doing anything specifically to attract battery startups, companies that are working on really advanced technology?
I mean, we're working on that all the time. Most of our companies are developed to the point where they have an interest in policy, and they're maybe not as early stage as that, but we're constantly trying to build those relationships and bring folks in from other parts of the country, and also to just see them develop here in Michigan. I know the universities are doing some pretty great work on that.
Yeah, I spent some time at the U of M battery lab, which was pretty cool. And I know there was just a report out, I think over the weekend, about, Michigan kind of falls behind a bit. We have some of the top research universities and institutions in the country, but don't necessarily always have the business climate where those companies can kind of incubate from within and grow. So I know that's something separate from this that I am very interested in, is how do we continue to support some of the work that's happening here and keep those folks here and bring talent in so that they can grow that work here and not just be used as a laboratory for outside companies to come in and utilize their space.
Yeah, those 3 R1s that we have are real essential. There's a lot of other great universities, and the battery lab at U of M and some of the other universities are doing research, but that startup atmosphere and ecosystem is really important. We've invested a lot with the MEDC in a startup landing zone called the Planet M Landing Zone in downtown Detroit. I think you might have been there before.
Thanks, Steve.
There's 50 companies there now. And you probably saw the announcement that Automation Alley, Centropolis, and Lean Rocket out of Jackson have banded together for an Industry 4.0 accelerator. These are the kinds of things that we need in place with regards to how we make things and how we innovate things. That is absolutely essential, and EV and battery technology's got to be a big part of that.
I hear, just because I talk to a lot of people and hear a lot of stuff, I hear often conflicting stories about what's going on out there in terms of technology, in terms of investment. So you're talking about Planet M, and you've got 50 companies in there right now. Last week I heard from Ted Serbinsky that he's shutting down Techstars Mobility in large part because there's a lack of corporate funding. What's going on there? Is this happening also in electric vehicles as well? I'm very well aware of what the OEMs and suppliers are doing on EVs in terms of development, in terms of investment, but tell me why this disconnect between corporate venture and startups that are working on advanced transportation technology?
I don't think it's so much a disconnect. So first of all, when Ted Serbinsky and Techstars came here, it was a game changer because there wasn't anything when they came here. I mean, what Ted did personally, I mean, Ted has been an incredible part of this community, lives here, stays here, still going to work here. Techstars, accelerators run their course, but if you look at what's around it now, you look at the new Michigan Innovation Lab that's going to be built downtown, the Innovation Center, if you look at the Planet M Landing Zone, if you look at what Ford's doing in Corktown, and there was a huge announcement that FCA and Plug and Play out of Silicon Valley are going to start another accelerator. Excuse me. None of that existed before. Centropolis didn't exist in Southfield at Lawrence Tech. Lean Rocket didn't exist in Jackson. So
are you saying that there was too much competition?
Well, I think that's exactly, corporate resources get allocated certain ways, and if you look at a company like Ford, they're Dearborn in Corktown right now when it comes to new investment.
Yeah.
So I think there's a couple things at play here, but I would argue that the ecosystem for startups, in fact, double venture capital. It was twice as much venture capital invested in Michigan last year as the year before.
How much of that was corporate? What percentage?
I don't know, Paul. We'd have to look at the MVCA report,
yeah,
but it's all in there.
Also Ford they're still investing a ton of money in Flat Rock to be their autonomous headquarters.
Right.
They were talking about $700 million a few years ago, and they're still building that route right now.
That's right.
Things have changed in 2 years big time, but they're going to do something with that. And they have that plant there. That's a smaller plant. They can't build 400,000 vehicles a year, but it can easily build 50 to 100,000 vehicles a year. And that might be a spot where they build another.
You're right. In Hamtramck, we were at the press conference a couple of weeks ago. This is a plant that was probably going to go away. Now it has a $2.2 billion investment, 2,200 jobs, all EVs and autonomous vehicle, right there in Hamtramck. That is a huge sign. What Rivian has done, I did not know you had 1,800 employees. Well, that's incredible. That's pushing Toyota, which is one of our largest corporate citizens in Michigan. So, this is an unbelievable success story for the state and hopefully for Rivian too.
I think separately too, one of the really exciting things for me is seeing the amount of corporate investment in FIRST robotics programs here in Oakland County. We have some of the best teams in the country, and I've been I spent a lot of fun time even with middle school teams, and it's really exciting to see. In Troy, I spent some time with a middle school all-girls team who kicked the boys' asses. You know, so I can be upfront about it. But it's seeing, I think maybe investment is shifting into different places, but I'm really excited about, if those girls grow up to be the next innovators of battery technology or vehicles. I mean, that's what gets me really excited.
And it seems like the industry is still lagging, including the tech industry out in Silicon Valley. How do you attract more young women to stay in Michigan or to come to Michigan and work in these?
Yeah, I mean, that is the tentpole of everything that I'm trying to do legislatively, right? I am one of the few people in the Michigan legislature who is not from Michigan originally, which was very scandalous when I ran for office. But when I chose to move back here, it is because I was a car designer originally, and I look around and there is no place that has changed the world more than Michigan. I represent the district where Ray and Charles Eames met at Cranbrook and fell in love and changed design forever. And we have so much to offer that, I could afford to buy a house here, and I couldn't do that. And I built my career between California and New York. And it's finding, not only the girls who are in Troy who are on this robotics team, but that's a big focus for me, is what do we do as a state to message outward that this is where you should move to and invest, because it's unbelievably beautiful, because it's affordable, and because we are innovative.
It seems like an easy thing to say. You're feeling shut out of Silicon Valley?
Come to
see
Michigan.
us. Duh.
Totally.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's about diversity and inclusion too, and it's about being a welcoming state for new Americans too. I mean, we have to have people come here. I mean, Mallory touched on some of the demographic shifts. They're really against us. Last year was the lowest birth rate in Michigan since 1941. So, and that's been dropping. So we have to grow our own people, and we have to attract people here. It's absolutely essential.
And we got to keep them here. So a simple investment in community colleges.
Yeah.
I'm a community college guy.
Right.
I went to community college. I was a trustee for 15 years at one locally in Monroe County. And investments like EMU. EMU is forgotten college in Michigan. We got the big ones, and we have EMU, Western Central. EMU wants to build a new engineering building.
And Oakland University.
Which would be huge in EVs and batteries and stuff. And 80% of their grads stay in the state. Some of the big schools, great. They have a great engineering school in Ann Arbor, but they leave the state.
Yeah.
And I asked somebody the other day, well, it's actually a few months ago, I said, who's got one of the best cybersecurity institutions?
EMU.
The answer was EMU, and that was somebody from U of M that said that. It's really encouraging.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thanks for coming. Thanks to our panel.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's get these bills moving.
Thanks for being here. Yeah. Let's get them done.
Yeah.